We begin, though, today with those peace talks between Russia and Ukraine that resumed in Istanbul.
Ukraine's President Zelenskyy is calling on the West to ramp up sanctions and increase military aid. And the UN Secretary General is pursuing a humanitarian ceasefire in the war-torn nation. On the ground, Ukrainians are working to fortify the important city of Odessa from Russian attacks. The Russian Navy has formed a blockade around the port city. But Ukraine is seeing some success. Leaders say they've recaptured some territories just outside the capital and pushed back Russian forces. For the latest, let's get to NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. He joins us now from Lviv, Ukraine. So, Gabe, this Ukrainian counteroffensive, what are you hearing about some of the progress they're making?
Hey there, Joe. Good morning. Well, yes, as you mentioned, Ukrainian forces have made some headway in and around Kyiv. The mayor of Irpin, one of the suburbs there, says that Ukrainians have been able to retake that city, but the fighting is intensifying in other parts of the country, in the northeast, in Mariupol, as you've said. And also this morning, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy saying that an airstrike has hit the southern city of Mykolaiv. At least 22 people have been injured. He is also providing an update on the situation in Mariupol right now, speaking to the Danish parliament, urging more international action to fight back against Russia. But President Zelenskyy says that more than 90% of the buildings in Mariupol have been destroyed, and he once again calls it a crime against humanity, Joe.
90%. Let's talk more about the diplomatic efforts. A fresh round of talks between Russia and Ukraine resumed today. What kind of impact will these recent Ukrainian victories, their progress, have? And could we see any progress on the path to peace?
Well, Joe, that's the hope. But according to a spokesperson for the interior minister here in Ukraine that said yesterday, they don't expect any major breakthrough from these talks. Still, several days ago, the Turkish president said that there is some agreement from Ukrainian and Russian officials, at least on several topics, including the agreement not to join NATO, as well as perhaps recognize Russia as an official language here in Ukraine. But the major sticking point, Joe, will continue to be this issue of territorial sovereignty and whether Ukraine might be willing to give up part of its territory, including the contested region of Donbass, where, again, the fighting has intensified and where a top Russian general has shifted that strategy, or said that Russia was shifting that strategy several days ago. A comment widely interpreted to mean that Russia was perhaps being unsuccessful in and around Kyiv and is shifting its focus back east. But it remains to be seen whether Ukraine would agree to any such shift in territory. President Zelenskyy has repeatedly said that that issue is off the table, Joe.
Yeah, Gabe, I want to ask you more about that. The Russian military claiming it's shifting the focus of its invasion to the eastern part of the country. But a missile attack hit an oil depot in the western part of the country late yesterday. Over the weekend, as you know full well, Russia launched missile strikes in the western city of Lviv, where you are, which has been a relative safe haven for thousands of Ukrainians. Is that sense of safety starting to vanish now?
Well, it has become, a way of life here in Lviv, Joe, but just within the past few minutes, we've been hearing air raid sirens going off. And, Joe, within the past few hours, the governor of the Lviv region says that air defense systems here in this area have shot down 3 missiles that were fired overnight. So certainly there are still attacks happening in the western part of this country. As you said, a relative safe haven for so many refugees that have come here. Still thousands streaming through here each day. But while Russia has been targeting targets such as military installations and fuel depots, it does seem that the most intense fighting continues to be in the eastern and southern parts of this country. But certainly everyone here is watching out and hearing anytime the air raid sirens go off. It is just another reminder that this is a country at war, Joe.
Hey, Gutierrez, thank you for your reporting. Please continue to stay safe.
In Washington, President Biden is attempting to contain the fallout from a controversial remark he made over the weekend that President Vladimir Putin, quote, cannot remain in power. Some heard this as a call for regime change in Russia. President Biden was asked about that yesterday.
I'm not walking anything back. The fact of the matter is I was expressing the moral outrage I felt toward the way Putin is dealing in the actions of this man. Just brutality. I want to make it clear. I wasn't then, nor am I now, articulating a policy change. I was expressing the moral outrage that I feel, and I make no apologies for it.
NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee joins us now. Hey, Carol, good morning. So yesterday we talked through how the White House was essentially playing defense over these few ad-lib words at the end of that speech over the weekend, different from these new remarks. We now have the president. Where is the White House at now with trying to put this to bed, given that stance we just heard there from Biden?
Well, good morning, Savannah. The White House essentially feels that the president coming out and offering his own clarification extensively, that is something that they hope will put this to bed. They had tried a number of times to clarify the remark through anonymous White House officials, the Secretary of State, and that just wasn't working. The president was being criticized not only for what he said, but also for the fact that he walked back then what he said. That was seen as something that wasn't really believable and also potentially making the president look weak. So we saw him come out intentionally taking questions, knowing what those questions were going to be, to put his own clarification on his initial comment. And one of the things that he addressed was this criticism that somehow his comments would potentially further provoke Vladimir Putin. Take a listen to the president's response.
Given his recent behavior, people should understand that he is going to do what he thinks he should do, period. He's not affected by anybody else, including, unfortunately, apparently his own advisors. This is a guy who goes to the beat of his own drummer. And the idea that he is going to do something outrageous because I called him for what he was and what he's doing, I think is just not rational.
The president was also quite defiant, saying that he was not walking anything back, that he meant what he said, although very aggressively tried to clarify that this was not a policy change, that the U.S. policy is not regime change in Russia. Savannah.
So that initial comment was during this trip that was to rally allies against Russia. That's when we saw President Biden in Poland. How have those allies responded to this remark?
Well, we've seen a number of them come out and say that both privately, we know that some of them have conveyed their concerns, and publicly, the French President Emmanuel Macron said that this is not something that he agrees with in terms of the president's comments. And so at the same time that the president was trying to unite NATO allies, he showed a little bit of division among them with these comments. And one of the things the president said yesterday was that NATO is united. He tried to, again, just put that argument to bed and say that this is not something that's dividing NATO. NATO is still very united in terms of pushing back on Russia's aggression in Ukraine. So, again, trying to put that criticism to bed as well.
Yeah, and now the Kremlin had said that they'd be watching this closely, pointed out that Russians elect Russians, not President Biden, in the wake of that first comment. What's their latest response, especially with these new comments from President Biden back here at home?
Well, we heard the Kremlin spokesperson say that this was something that was unacceptable, and also criticizing President Biden for what he said were personal insults towards Russian President Vladimir Putin. You know, the U.S. response to that, and the president alluded to this yesterday, is just that he doesn't really care what Putin thinks. And the idea that this is somehow insulting for the president to call Putin these names and to say that he shouldn't be in power based on his actions in Ukraine is just kind of laughable because of all of the steps that Putin has been taken. So they're very dismissive of it. At the same time, you know, they do. And one of the interesting things the president said yesterday was that he might be willing to meet with Putin if the circumstances were right for that. And so they haven't completely closed the door on some potential in the future outreach there.
Which was some of the concern over those comments in the first place, that it was essentially doing that, closing the door on a diplomacy route. Carol Lee, thank you so much.
Ukraine's deputy prime minister announced today 3 new humanitarian corridors will open as the refugee crisis in Eastern Europe worsens by the day. Nearly 4 million Ukrainians have now fled their home countries since the war broke out, with many heading into Poland. And that is where we find NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman. He's in Warsaw for us this morning. So, Josh, first of all, what is the situation like on the ground where you are?
Well, here in Poland, you have a lot of refugees who are trying to figure out, is this a brief temporary stay, or should they be looking to start new lives either here or in other countries? And so you have some who are hoping that they are going to be able to get back to Ukraine as soon as possible and are reluctant to start making medium or long-term plans. But then you have others who realize that this could go on for a whole long time and are trying to find their ways to other places, either to other parts of Europe, to Germany or elsewhere. Some of them here in Warsaw are here for a brief stay and then finding their ways to other less crowded parts of Poland. And then you have many trying to get to places like the United States, hoping that they might be able to get a visa due to family ties or U.S. Plans to take in more refugees. And I want you to meet Elena Godogienko, who I met yesterday outside of the U.S. Embassy here in Warsaw. She's 35. She was with her son. She's pregnant with her second. Her husband, of course, back in Ukraine, still part of the response to the war. Here's what she told me about her experience so far.
I've been here for almost a month, but it's actually I'm lucky. Some people have stayed just on the Poland border for 5 days. Yeah. From what I know, so I'm a lucky one. I made it in just 1 day to cross the border, and some people have stayed there for 3-5 days, and it's very hard to travel. That's actually the reason why my parents are still in Kyiv, because this is such a long road.
For those who are planning to stay here in Poland for a while, Joe, one of the things we've seen them doing is registering for what's called a PESA, which is equivalent to like a social security number in the United States. The Polish government is registering these refugees, giving them those numbers, and then they can use them to do things like find a job, get an apartment, sign up for insurance or a bank account, all the basics that they would need to have a normal life, at least in the short term here in Poland.
Anything else, Josh, you can tell us about how Poland's accommodating these refugees? And what are we hearing from other countries like the U.S. and the plans they're making to try and take more people in?
Well, one of the hallmarks of the response here in Poland, which of course has taken in by far the most Ukrainian refugees, is that by and large, they're not in anything that looks like refugee camps. There are some large centers housing numbers of refugees, but for the most part, you're seeing a lot of individual families taking in refugees, bringing them into their homes as guests and trying to give them some semblance of a normal family life while they're here. And as far as other countries like the United States, President Biden has announced the U.S. will take in up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, but they are still figuring out exactly what that process is going to look like and how they can speed up the process, particularly for Ukrainians who have ties to a U.S. citizen, a relative or a business associate. The State Department telling me they are working right now on those plans, and we'll have more to announce in the next few days.
All right, Josh Letterman in Warsaw. Josh, thank you so much.
Ukrainian college students here in the U.S. are dealing with the stress of war back home on top of their studies. According to the Institute of International Education, about 1,700 Ukrainians are studying here. Well, now one major university system is stepping up to help their community of current Ukrainian students. Texas A&M University is now offering them free tuition. One student there spoke with NBC News about what it's like watching her home country come under attack from thousands of miles away.
The first week I was not able to focus on school at all. I just go through the important things, but I don't go into details on how many people died or what happened there, you know. I just check that there's nothing going on where my family lives. So, and then I call them, make sure they're okay, and then I keep going with my day, you know.
Nadia says her parents are still in Ukraine in the west near Lviv. She says she was in Ukraine this winter to see her family. Texas A&M is now covering Nadia's tuition and living expenses, something that Nadia calls a big weight off her shoulders as she deals with the stress of war back home in Ukraine. The school's also looking to help out Ukrainian professors who are looking for somewhere to teach.
We would like nothing more than to be a safe haven for some of these folks. But the only thing we would like more than that is for other universities to do the same thing and make sure that those young men and women in colleges and universities and higher education in Ukraine are able to continue their work here along with the professors that were working with them in research.
The university also says it's cut off all ties with Russia since the war began, and they stress, as you just heard, they are hoping other schools follow suit.
Time to get a check on your morning news now. Weather?
That means Bill Cairns joins us this morning. Hey, Bill.
Hey, good morning. And have you seen the video and pictures out of Pennsylvania yesterday from the snow squall accidents? just about as tragic as it gets. And you kind of have to set the scene with these things. People, it's hard to believe how these could happen. You could be driving down a highway for 40 miles. The road is clear, the sun is out, or it's partly cloudy. And then all of a sudden you just come up upon a whiteout conditions like a blizzard suddenly. It's almost like a summertime downpour, but with snow. And it looks like this when you're in the middle of them. Watch the guy right there in the middle of your screen. Anytime you're in this scenario whatsoever, you have to get away from your vehicle. And that person is so fortunate to be alive because, one wrong step to the other direction and that car would have slammed into his car and then he would have been out of commission. So in all, Schuylkill County is reporting at least 20 injuries, 3 fatalities, hundreds of accidents. Just crazy scenario. So let's take a look at what we're dealing with out there today. And the snow squall action is coming to an end. You can see what it looked like yesterday. It was all through Pennsylvania and areas of New York State. Even New Jersey had some snow squall warnings. This was the radar from yesterday, not today. And you can see it's just all these little dots. So it was hit and miss. It wasn't everywhere. This morning, the wind chills are still brutally cold for this time of year. We're at 4 right now in Boston, -3 in Maine. The very unusually cold air mass that's right over the top of New England today. But we're already keeping our eyes on the next storm. This one's going to bring severe weather the next few days, but it's also going to bring some winter weather. We still have some winter storm warnings in the mountains outside of L.A. We have winter weather advisories from the portions of the Wasatch Range of Utah, up on the rim in Arizona, up to Flagstaff, the Grand Canyon, and also much of areas of the Rockies. And then we have winter weather advisories in place through northern Wisconsin, Michigan, and also the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So total snow, enough to shovel northern Iowa, La Crosse, northwards up to Marquette. That's at least 2 to 4 inches. Someone could get 6 to 8 inches of snow. So it's still cold in the Northeast, and we'll talk more next hour about our severe weather outbreak coming for the South. And unfortunately, guys, it looks like another tornado outbreak, too.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Lots going on. It is certainly very cold here. When I left this morning, I think it said feels like 17.
Yeah, it's like an early April Fool's joke with the weather. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Yes.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.